Okay. And we're also going to start with a land acknowledgement. This is something that Rights and Democracy likes to do at the start of every meeting now. Rights and Democracy is located on the land which has long served as a site, of meeting and exchange among Indigenous people for thousands of years, and is home to the Western Abenaki people. Rights and Democracy honors, recognizes, and respects these people, especially the Abenaki, as the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which we gather today. In that spirit, today we'll begin by acknowledging that we are guests in this land, and we need to respect and help protect the lands within our use. So it's just a little land acknowledgement to just let everyone know on the call, and just feel that we really should be appreciative of the land that we stand on, and acknowledge that it is stolen land. For those filtering in, we have got a really great chapter meeting today. We've got 3, maybe 4 fantastic guests. We've got David Zuckerman coming in just a minute. We've got Mohamed from the Black perspective talking about the protests going on in Battery Park now for 31 days, which is just an absolutely incredible achievement. And we've got Emily Hecker as well, who's running for state rep in Chittenden 10, telling us a little bit about her campaign and how that's going and what we need to do to get her over the finish line in November. We also may have Keisha Ram coming in at some point as well, giving us a quick update on what's been going on in the State House and what's going on in the State Senate races in Chittenden, which are also, be happening on the 3rd of November. Just a couple of other housekeeping parts before we get going. I'd like to note there is other business happening in Burlington this evening. The Charter Change Committee is meeting literally right now, where they're discussing just cause eviction, which is certainly one of RAD's priorities. That would be a charter change getting rid of no cause eviction, which for those that don't know, in Vermont right now, you are able to get evicted for no cause whatsoever from your house if you're a tenant. And that is something that we want to get rid of, because frequently landlords use it as not only a way to discriminate against people of color for disabilities or for sexist reasons, but also uses it as a method of intimidation to stop many of their tenants from complaining about poor standard or substandard living conditions. The Charter Change is discussing that this evening, so we may have a small unusual attendance because there's a lot of chapter or Burlington chapter members that will be attending that and voicing their support for just cause eviction. And in that Charter Change Committee, they are also going to be talking about creating citizen oversight for policing in Burlington, which is also enormously important and something that is long overdue. So really important committee that's going on right now. It should also be happening next week as well. So I urge anyone who is interested in just cause and for racial justice to please start attending those Charter Change Committee meetings, because that's really where a lot of the important work is getting done right now. For those of you just coming in, we are just getting going. I just noticed our one of our guests of honor, David Zuckerman, just coming into the meeting now. And I'm just going to launch straight into it. We'll be doing some Q&As with all our guests tonight. So if you do have a question, please pop it in the chat and we'll get to each one after each presentation. Well, our first guest this evening needs no introduction, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. He is a progressive giant in Vermont and a friend of Rights and Democracy. Starting his political career in 1996, he has risen from state rep to state senator to lieutenant governor, and is now our RAD-endorsed gubernatorial Democratic candidate. He has maintained a strong progressive values throughout his career and is a true believer in policies that will benefit us all, not just a privileged few. He's been fighting battles on livable wages, progressive taxation, environmental justice, and equal pay for decades, and putting in the hard work when there were few voices in power doing so. He is ready to take this state in the direction that we need to go and become the standard bearer and the example Vermont should and can be to the rest of the country when it comes to climate change, racial justice, labor rights, and healthcare. David Zuckerman, it is an honor to have you here tonight.
Well, thank you, Tom, and everybody else here on Rights and Democracy or with Rights and Democracy, organizers, activists, fighters for justice. It's really a pleasure to be with Rights and Democracy, where I feel a lot of the roots of common values reside. And, Rights and Democracy does such a good job of really keeping all of our feet to the fire. I tell you, it's a very different position running for and holding statewide office than being a senator. And that's a different position than having been a legislator from a smaller district in the House, because you do really hear from a tremendous range of people with very valid places of origin where they come from, even if some of what they believe in is sometimes jarring or difficult. And so often the job, as one has, I guess, as I have gone into higher office, is to figure out a way to find people where they are and help them see, maybe in a new way or in a broader way, what's going on, where it isn't us versus them, where it isn't this person is hurting me, where instead it's, wait, how is the system failing all of us? How is the system creating hurdles for people based on many different circumstances, financial hurdles, race and gender hurdles, orientation hurdles, all of these issues, many of them are the political system, as well as aspects of our society that are rooted in sort of our lizard brain tribalism, if I can be so sort of cerebral about it. It's just been a remarkable journey to have run as a progressive for the legislature and served there for 14 years and fighting for many of these justice issues, occasionally succeeding, most of the time just trying to feed the soil to make success happen eventually. And, just yesterday, we passed cannabis reform that I know has some issues and some challenges, but it's important to remember, I started talking about cannabis reform in my race for the legislature in 1994 when I lost. That's 26 years ago. And so as someone who's fought for it over many steps, over many years, from medical cannabis to decriminalization, to legalization, to creating a tax and regulate system, through all of those years, people have said, oh, well, you're just a hippie that wants to smoke pot, when in reality, the effort was really around youth issues, attacking the war on drugs, which has been one of the most racist and systemic racist policies that we have in government. Even just posting that on my lieutenant governor page yesterday, folks should check it out. The comments, when I said, this is related to working and tackling some of our systemic racism, the comments, oh, look at that, bringing racism into something that has nothing to do with racism. And thankfully, some other people commented and said, wait a minute, do you know about where the term marijuana came from? Do you know about Henry Ainslinger? Do you know about Nixon's war on drugs to really suppress the civil rights movement and the peace movements in the 1960s and early 70s? There's just so much information that sometimes we gain as we fight for justice that we forget many other people don't know. And so in this race for governor, what I'm trying to do is open the door wider for these conversations where we can comprehend that other people are unaware and work to help them with more information, plant seeds where they can grow and learn from, so that we can tackle these injustices. And what I recognize is, as a white cis male, I'm in a far easier position to be able to absorb some of the vitriol that some of the folks that aren't where we are, where they have that. And so I sometimes feel like my job is to put something out there, take some of the barbs as we try to open up the conversation, because others who are more susceptible to the systemic racism and sexism and economic suppression maybe don't have the same opportunity to be able to absorb that. And so as governor, I'm hoping to be able to broaden that conversation, bring people into the conversation that have not been at the table, so that we can address systemic racism, so we can address systemic economic suppression that has happened in our society to working people across all lines, really. And I'm pretty excited about what's happening in this campaign. Even the recent poll, for those that saw it, that got me down for a little bit. But when you actually look at the data, it was way off on a bunch of things. Why is Peter Welch suddenly 10% less supported than he was a year ago or 2 years ago in the last poll? Why did this poll find out that 37% of Vermonters voted for Hillary Clinton when 57% voted for Hillary Clinton? So something about the demographics of who they polled was very skewed away from our direction and our philosophy on a number of issues. I'm not saying Hillary Clinton and we are all in the same place, but it does show that that poll was off. And that poll was taken before our TV ad went up, before our radio ads went up, before our mailings went out. And really, while most people are in this COVID coma, which is understandable, we're anxious, we're afraid. We're afraid for our economic circumstances. We're afraid for our kids who are in school. We're afraid for people who are already marginalized being further pushed to the edge. And so, you know, people really haven't been paying attention to this race. Tomorrow is the first debate, public radio and public television. We're recording it at 9 in the morning. So wish me luck tomorrow morning, and then listen in at noon and 7 and 8 o'clock on public television. Tonight, we're doing another one of our telephone town halls, which is something I've been doing in counties all across the state. Tonight is Chittenden County. It's at 7 o'clock right after I leave here. I got to go set that up. You can visit my website for the dial-in number, but I'm also going to give it to you right now. And maybe someone who's on my team is on this call and can type it in. There it is, Emily. You nailed it. Although my understanding is the phone number is 8. Oh, that's my dial-in number. Yeah, that's the number. Emily's got it right. So we're going to be doing that tonight, and I'm just really excited to bring people into a conversation about justice issues. Hopefully Senator-elect Keisha Ram is going to be on the call. I think Doug Racine is going to be on the call, and Krista Hewling, who's a teacher, is going to be on the call. She used to be on the State Board of Education. So I'm having these telephone town halls in counties all over the state. Sunday, I'm doing a drive. Holy moly, I'm going to Norwich, Westminster, Putney, Brattleboro, Wilmington, Bennington, and Dorset, and back home. So I'm going to loop the whole east, south, southwest, west side of the state. So I'm all in. I would love all of your help making phone calls, putting out, doing honking waves, putting out lawn signs, writing letters to the editor, posting in front porch forums. And it's really important for people to recognize that while Phil Scott is certainly not Donald Trump in any way, he is not really taking on Donald Trump in the way that a reasonable and responsible New England Republican should. Donald Trump is tearing apart our democracy. He is shredding all institutional norms. And I get that some of us want to shred certain aspects of the institutional norms, like systemic racism and others, but I think we also value how our democracy is supposed to work. Maybe not, but I think so. And I would hope that this governor, instead of just saying, well, I don't think I'm going to vote for Trump, could be a little more forceful about why we cannot be voting for Trump. We have to be voting for the alternative, even if it's not our first choice. Bernie was by far my first choice. But for our institutions that in the long run are going to build equal rights and justice, economic justice, and others, we cannot have Trump as president anymore. You know, this governor has vetoed critical bills important to folks in rights and democracy. Raise the minimum wage twice, paid family and medical leave, medical monitoring for those poisoned by toxic chemicals, by toxic polluters. And of course, just recently, the Global Warming Solutions Act. I mean, it is insane to me that half the Democrats are thinking of voting for him right now. They're in the COVID coma, and I need your help to wake them up. Not just talking amongst ourselves, but reaching out to new people, which is also the way that we're going to build the movement. So, you know, I could go on and on. Very thankful for Rights and Democracy endorsement. I'm very thankful for the $2, the $20, the $500, whatever contributions some of you have been able to make. Thank you. I'm thankful for your activism, because your activism opens up the door of conversation on many issues that politicians aren't ready to talk about. And I'd be more than happy to do a little Q&A here for, whatever we got left here, 15, 20 minutes, whatever you think is appropriate, Tom. So thank you everyone for the opportunity, and we are going hard. Ballots are being mailed out. We just mailed out, I think today or tomorrow, 80,000 cards of information to different households that are swing votes, and we got to bring it home.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I've got a few questions for you, but I would also really like to open it up for anyone who is listening in. Please pop a question in the chat and I will make sure I get to it as well. But yeah, let's kick it off. So you did mention already that the Global Warming Solution Act was vetoed last week by our governor. And it's only thanks to a veto-proof majority that we managed to get it through. So what does that, to you, say of, what does that veto say of Scott's priorities, and what are your priorities on climate when you become governor?
Well, a cornerstone of my campaign has to do with the climate crisis, the climate economy, and having a future for all of us. I mean, this is just, it's absurd how clear the science is right now. It's funny, occasionally people are attacking me around science, including the governor, when you look at the science of the climate crisis being incredibly clear. And even just a few years ago, he said, well, it's a little bit shady. He didn't say shady. It's a little bit human caused. It's a little bit natural cycles. It's like, the extremes of this climate crisis are clearly human caused. So from a science perspective, if he's going to follow science on COVID, he should follow science on the climate. He should follow science and facts around raising the minimum wage to help lift people out of poverty instead of vetoing it. He should follow the science on a 24-hour waiting period to purchase a gun, which is very clear will reduce successful suicides and keep more people alive. It will reduce domestic violence, injury, and death. These things are statistically very clear. So if he's going to follow science, we got to follow it all the way through. And it's just really clear that for me, the climate and a climate economy is the vision for our future. And for him, it's still climate and economy versus the environment. It's still, let's just do a few little free market things. It's just very revealing around his small government, don't have much vision mentality versus mine, which is we have no time left. We need to be organizing both in government and out of government. We need to be providing resources to weatherize low-income people's homes and fixed-income seniors' homes, putting people to work in $15 to $18 an hour jobs to save working-class Vermonters' heating bills and energy bills. We need to be building affordable housing in our town and village centers so people can live and work in place. We need to be able to fund expansion of broadband so that tens of thousands of Vermont kids can get an adequate education when you have to learn remotely, and to create economic opportunity for folks to live and work in place, create good paying jobs in rural areas that aren't all natural resource based. We just have huge opportunities around a climate economy, and I've got vision for that, and he's got veto for that. I mean, that's pretty clear, a big difference.
And you've been a strong advocate for progressive policies throughout your career. And you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but what are the main progressive targets you have for when you get into the governor's office?
Well, fundamentally, and maybe this is where Bernie as a mentor for me has really focused me, is so many injustices stem from economic injustice. If people are struggling, they start to point the finger at the other. They point the finger at the immigrant. They're taking our jobs. They point the finger at someone else, rather than fostering that and keeping that going by having an economic unjust system. We have to raise the minimum wage. We have to work our way towards universal health care, even if it's starting with just universal primary care. We have to tackle affordable childcare. We need to tackle affordable housing. All of these issues are around economic inequalities and injustices that then fester and build other problems. Economic stress can lead to mental health struggles. The challenges around economics lead people to pointing fingers and creating racism and so many other factors. We need to tackle the systemic racism throughout our system. That's what systemic racism is. Whether it's in our drug laws and our criminal justice reform laws, economic development laws, education and detention and suspension, just one thing after another. I don't know who listened to public radio today, but there was a conversation about what was it? I'm going to use the wrong terminology. They had a very good terminology, and I can't remember what it was. But basically, that Black and brown people will take all the stuff down that's in their house that signals that it's occupied by Black people when it's getting appraised. And there was someone who did that, and their appraisal changed by $100,000 just by sort of de-blacking their house. And that wasn't the term. I just don't know what the term was. And that's messed up. When appraisers have a bias that they walk into a house and there's pictures of Black people on the wall, or Black musicians on the wall, or art or cultural artifacts in the house that make it into a, quote, Black house, that house is then appraised at a lower value than if it was white people house in the exact same neighborhood, with the exact same fixtures and windows and doors and number of bedrooms and bathrooms. That is an example of systemic racism. And we've got to be addressing those issues.
Yeah, definitely one of the bigger questions and one of the bigger issues that Vermont needs to be facing right now. Vermont certainly has a reputation for being almost left libertarian. So how does that fit in with your ideology, and why does your message resonate with those folks?
Yeah, it's hard, because politics is not linear, right? Left libertarian almost points out that it like bends around, because there's a whole bunch of right wingers that think government should be smaller, government's in the way, and left libertarians starts moving towards an anarchist system as well. I mean, there's a lot of different funky overlaps here, but I'm not a libertarian-esque small government person, because I do think there's an element of libertarianism that is quite race-based. White people have inherent advantages in our society by not being followed around the store as a suspicious person, not being pulled over by law enforcement as much because white people aren't as oriented towards crime as Black people. I mean, just insane biases that exist in our society. And so when you look at the libertarian movement, it's very, very white, because and it's often descendants of people either with land or access to land. Because if you have land and you can live alone on your land and you can grow your own food and you have a chainsaw and you can buy whatever, you can be sort of isolationist, libertarian, small government, maybe you have some advantages. But for a lot of people who have been given many wealth disadvantages in our society, to say, let's just get rid of government, which to me is part of the great equalizer. Government is part of what can say, wait a minute, wealth has been concentrated. Let's make sure to use some of that wealth for education that can expand opportunities for everybody, no matter what your current wealth status is, that could really open the door for your future. What about the fact that libertarianism says, well, if you have enough money to hire a private firefighter, if your house catches on fire, well, great. But, if someone else doesn't, too bad. It was Ben Franklin who looked at that system that used to exist and said, wait a minute, if the house next to you is burning because they don't have a private firefighter, it puts your house at risk. So we should all pay for firefighters. We should all pay for law enforcement. And I get that law enforcement should be rephrased into public safety. And public safety should be more about someone coming around to help de-escalate a situation than necessarily coming around to just quickly jump in and often amplify a situation. It's a combination of all those things. So left libertarianism to me is more about really bolstering mutual aid societies and mutual aid groups that all sprung up around the COVID crisis, where local organizations sprung up to help their neighbors. And maybe part of left libertarianism is making sure there are resources available to help those small, spontaneous community service organizations to do their thing without so many regulations that, oh, well, you can't feed people with food that wasn't made in the proper oven. Well, people are hungry. Yesterday I was in Johnson, and they have a wood-fired oven out in a town park. And once a week, a bunch of volunteers come in with volunteered food, donated food, and make pizzas and give away something like 300 pizzas a night, once a week, to hungry people, to the community. The community comes together. How can we help foster that would be what left libertarianism would be to me.
I got a question from Emily Hecker. She says, you've been fighting the good fight in Vermont for so long, making sustained change is hard. I know that for sure. And I'm sure a lot of other activists on this call do as well. It really can burn you out. So what keeps you going and keeps you inspired?
A banana. I haven't got a clue sometimes. My parents were from very different worlds. My parents were teachers, and his father was a teacher in New York City. My dad went to get a medical degree and served as a medical doctor in Vietnam to help pay for his college and go on to thankfully be pretty successful until he passed away young at 52 as a doctor who had been exposed to radiation due to a part of the procedures he used and got cancer from medical advancements. So for those that wonder why I am not, the perfect person on all science and advancements, well, because there are always consequences. And my dad died when I was 13. My mom grew up in a long line of sort of Boston area, Yankee, slightly more conservative Republican families. But they both always infused in me that, and maybe my dad being Jewish was part of this, that our role in life is to make life better, is to improve people's lives. That coming from a place of relatively good fortune, my dad being a doctor, coming out of college with no debt, is a huge advantage. And with privilege comes responsibility. And with the opportunity to do almost anything because of having access to education and a stable household, it also meant there was a responsibility to do whatever I do well, put everything into it, and take nothing for granted, because so many other people don't have that opportunity. And there are little moments in the day or in the year or in the life that that reward me. One story I've told was when I went to the Tunbridge World's Fair 2 years ago, and I was going through the fair right during the debate season. It was September, almost exactly 2 years ago. And in one of the buildings was an older woman playing piano in time period piece from the 1800s. And she was blind. And we were talking, I was introducing myself, and I was telling her about who I am and what I stand for. And I said, here, let me give you my business card in case you want to reach out to me sometime. And you could see in her body language, she was like, what is the point of you giving me a business card? I can't. There's nothing on the business card of any use to me as a blind person. I mean, all of that was portrayed through her body language. And when I gave her the business card that happens to also be in Braille, that I was inspired by another lieutenant governor the year before to get my cards in Braille. The energy that came from her body of being included in the political process, of being recognized that there needs to be ways to reach people who are different or have different abilities, really was a moment that I will remember forever. Because she felt included in her late 70s for the first time in the political process, to have a voice, to be reached out to and be recognized. Another story that I could tell is that I worked for 9 years on end-of-life choices. Now, wealthy people have choice at end of life. They have relationships with their doctor. My dad, when he was in the hospital dying because he was a medical doctor, had access to control his own morphine drip, to control his own pain, and eventually to control when his life was going to be over, because it just wasn't going to keep going. Most people don't have that option. And so I fought for end-of-life choices so that people of any circumstance could take control at the end of their own life. And when people come up to me, random people, maybe once a year, someone comes up to me and says, I want to thank you, David, because your fight for that issue for 9 years made it so that my family could be around my mom or my dad or my aunt when they were near the end of their life. And we could spend time with them, and they were in control of their life at the end. And that ability to have them in control and at peace with their ending was made much more whole by the work that you and others did. And I want to thank you. When someone tells you that, that charges your batteries for a long time to keep fighting to make someone else's life that much better, even at the end of their life. And so every day I wake up on the farm, I feel so lucky to have land, to be growing food, to be able to see the sky and the stars and the rising sun and the sunrise. I just feel incredibly lucky. And that it's important that having that fortune and luck means that I need to help make other people's lives a little bit luckier and a little bit better. And that's what gives me drive every day, is finding what I enjoy and what brings me good, and then figure out how I can do a little bit that day to do that for somebody else.
So one major issue across the country right now, and you certainly have already touched on this, is racial justice and policing in Vermont. And we've actually got Mohamed Sharif on from the Black perspective, who will be speaking after you, who's been a massive leader in this push in Burlington. The statistics are not great for Vermont. We like to think ourselves as exceptional. We like to think ourselves as not racist, but frankly, the data doesn't lie. And we have one of the highest incarceration rates in the country for Black people per capita in Vermont. So how do you plan on making sure that Vermont is a standard bearer for racial justice issues in the country?
Yeah, I mean, the first way for me to make sure Vermont's a standard bearer is to really sit down and talk with members of the community that have experienced the ways that our system is systemically messed up. There's a combination. Some of it we know certain statistics. We know that in certain aspects of our laws, there's just inherent injustices, and we can start to tackle those. But there's a lot of ways that I don't know. And so the first part is to say, I don't know all the answers, but let's look for people all over the state that have lived experiences that can help me understand what their experience is. Then we can see what aspects of that experience are inherently based in systemic challenges that we have, like suspensions and detentions in school. You know, it's regularly talked about that kids basically from like 3rd to 5th grade start to figure out whether or not they're going to have a chance to go on to higher education and have a future in that direction. And they either start to keep working towards that opportunity or kind of close the doors themselves to that opportunity. Well, one has to imagine that if there's higher rates of suspension and detention or punishment, if you're Black or brown, that probably yet fewer kids in those age ranges with those demographics are thinking the door is open to them to have a prosperous future. So what can we do in our schools to make sure our teachers are trained not to think that, you know, a Black kid walking down the hall with a hoodie on is somehow any different than a white kid walking down the hall with a hoodie on. Something is inherently, you know, in our implicit biases when we have those different thoughts. And we have to continue to explore those ourselves. And then we have to look at what are those policies. So it's education, it's economic development and resources, it's our incarceration system and cash bail that Sarah George is really doing incredible leadership on. But there's more. And I'm sure there's more that I don't know. And I want to make sure people are at the table to help me know and to elevate their voices into positions of leadership so that they can also be mentors for others to see coming up in next generations.
And we do have a question from Mohamed, actually, who, as I said, is one of the leaders of the Black perspective. Do you have any thoughts on the protests that are ongoing in Battery Park in Burlington right now?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on them, and I had been to some of the earlier rallies. I'm sorry that I haven't been to some more lately. I did visit last week to the encampment to visit and introduce myself and hear and listen and learn. Most of the folks had gone, I think, down to Barrie that day for some protests in Barrie that were obviously critically important to do. So unfortunately, it was just a bad time for me to visit to really get exposed and listen and learn. But, you know, there was the food tent, there's the medical tent, you know, it was clean. You know, I think that, you know, the portrayal of these situations, both around the country and in Burlington, is often very different than the reality. And I think it's really important that we make sure not to allow the sensationalist portrayal to tarnish our image of the justices that we're fighting for. And I do think it's an extremely difficult situation because of the realities of the system, of contract law, of how it all works, and that we're in this incredibly fraught moment where we do demand and we need immediate change, and we have a system that was set up not to have rapid change. And I tell you, when I've worked on end-of-life choices for 9 years, marriage equality for 8 or 9 years, cannabis reform for 26 years, GMO labeling for 14 years, it has been very, very frustrating. And I completely, well, I can't completely understand the frustration because I don't live it every day. But the frustration that change can't happen faster is real. It's understandable. And we have to try to figure out a way to say, let's work towards this change. Let's fix the system. And let's make sure we don't lose allies. I will say, I have heard from some constituents, and maybe this is coming from a different perspective, but there are people that are saying, I was yelled at when I was on Church Street. And I don't think people were yelled at. I think there was a call to say, stand up if you're with us. Don't just sit there. But from their perspective, they felt yelled at. And if we want to be a system where we are recognizing impact, not just intent, we also have to recognize how our methodologies impact others who may or may not be ready to hear what's being said. And so my job is to help bring folks along from all different places to help everybody be able to talk in a language that can connect and move us forward, rather than disconnect and drive us backwards. And it's not an easy thing. We're in a very tough moment. I'm pleased that progress was made with one of the folks in law enforcement. I think it's very strange that we have to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars that could be used for other aspects of, bettering justice in our society. And maybe that's an element that the group in the park should think about and say, wait a minute, if we could extract $100,000+ or whatever amount it was to make sure that person wasn't going to be in law enforcement anymore, what if we got that equivalent amount of money for the other two to go towards other forms of economic justice or racial justice and solving injustice in our community, while moving the policies forward that would make it so that no other law enforcement would be able to get away with what these people get away with. Because if they're not going to get removed, we should at least extract resources to be used for betterment on these issues. I don't know what the solution is outside the box, but we've got to be thinking in all kinds of outside the box ways of how can we tackle these injustices in our community. Would be some feedback, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to hear a little bit from Mohamed in just a bit.
Yeah, I'd love to be able to hear from him some, so before I have to leave. So if you do go to him, I can stay on for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, well, in which case, I'll leave you this last question, and maybe you can answer real quick. But with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg this week, we're really seeing what can happen with obviously a huge tragedy, but what may and what could happen with a Republican majority on the courts, and really what the ramifications are of Republican control across the country. So what unspoken ramifications do you see with another Scott administration that we're not aware of or we haven't been speaking about?
Well, I mean, the Scott administration has said no new taxes for a long time. And if we go through economic hardships the next couple of years, and he's unwilling to raise revenue to fill the holes in many of the support programs that are particularly, they help people who are struggling economically, but we know that Black and brown brothers and sisters are unfortunately in more economic strife than white brothers and sisters, although there are both and all of the above in these struggles. So what programs are going to get cut that are going to be critical for people to keep roofs over their heads, food on the table, and so forth. So that's a huge arena. And one of the things I would say to challenge Governor Scott on is, as a reasonable or nice Republican who's okay with painting Black Lives Matter on the street in front of the State House, that's all fine and well. But all he has said so far with Trump is, well, I'm not going to vote for him. Well, we need rational Republicans to be coming out saying, not only am I not going to vote for him, I'm going to speak out against the fact that he is attacking our election system, which if we lose that, and you think we have challenges right now with racism out there, and Trump doesn't leave office, he's going to be emboldened to do a whole lot more damage to immigrants and Black and brown people with many, many years of ancestry in this country. This governor needs to be outspoken against Trump and his disbelief in science. Because if we don't have someone believing in science in the White House, then the disproportionate deaths from COVID will continue. Then the healthcare system and the opportunities to build a better healthcare system for all and break down the health disparities in Black and brown populations will certainly get worse. So it's not just that he'll be governor, but as governor, he needs to be a leading voice around these issues, because particularly as a Republican, he could galvanize. There are reasonable and rational Republicans out there, and he could galvanize them against Trump, but he's not, because he does rely on that 30% of Vermont that's going to vote for Trump in order to win. And he relies on the RGA money. And so I need people out there saying, no, Phil Scott, you have not done enough to earn our support, because you have not taken the role and responsibility that you have being in the Republican Party to challenge Trump on these issues. So I do need folks' help. I think Emily posted the website, but I don't want to dominate any more than I already have. But folks can reach out, and I'm happy to answer more questions.
Thanks so much, Lieutenant Governor. It's been a pleasure having you. Our next guest, we have been speaking about him already, is Mohamed Sharif. He is a remarkable human being, an example of what an organizer can be. We spoke to Mohamed about 3 months ago, just after the formation of the Black Perspective and following their first march on Burlington after the murder of George Floyd. Little did we know then, or maybe we should have expected, the Black Perspective would then go on to literally reshape the way policing is practiced in Burlington. Through rigorous organization and sustained protest, they have been instrumental in reducing the police force in the city by 30%. They forced the city to rid itself of at least one violent racist police officer, and they put racial issues in Vermont into focus. The progress they have made so far has been remarkable, and the changes still to come could be groundbreaking. It brings me enormous pleasure to welcome back to Rights and Democracy, Mohamed Sharif.
Thank you very much for having me.
Mohamed, we'll just go straight into the Q&A on this one for you this evening. So it is day 31 of the protests outside Battery Park. When this started, was this a vision, or did it evolve as it continued?
So after the shooting of Jacob Blake, the Black Perspective hosted an emergency event for him, and it was successful. It happened. And so the leaders in the Black Perspective decided to, like, individually as Black leaders, not members of the Black Perspective, to invite everybody to a 24-hour protest. And that kind of just naturally just turned into like setting demands for like why we're doing this, because, you know, afterwards we found out that situation with Jacob Blake was actually somewhat getting better. But we still want to take advantage of the occupation that we initiated. So we wrote down the demands of the 3 officers, and that was now our main focus on why we were there. And 24 hours obviously turned into 31 days. And then we have other demands that we also have, in addition to the 3 officers that we want removed, which is also providing some sort of solution for the houseless individuals that we are now close to and we built relationships with.
Yeah, it's quite remarkable the setup you have there, and supporting obviously your own activists, but also the house's population through mutual aid. And so I'm really glad that those demands for the houses have also been incorporated to your message. You had a really big win, or maybe not. It depends on the way you see it. But Officer Bellavance was offered a amount of money to resign this week, and we do believe he's going to be taking it. How do you feel about that decision made by the city council and the city itself?
I mean, first of all, I don't like the fact that it took us a month to remove one individual that is clearly a corrupt individual. And I don't like how we have to pay him to be removed from his job. But then again, I look at it from the other side where like we still did remove him. We didn't get exactly what we wanted, but it's still better than him still being inside the police force.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, as I understand it, there was a lot of issues in terms of police union contracts, the police chief being amenable to this deal, and so it took a long time, and it's costing a lot of money now. But yeah, as you said, it's great that he is off the force. One big element of this protest has been a strict no talking to the media approach. In many articles, in many videos, you see thousands of protesters remaining vigilant, and when asked about the protests, they refer back to the demands that they're asking for, and that is it. In your own words, why did you take this approach to the media, and did that approach work out for you, or is it working out for you?
So 7 Days did release an article today, and that kind of shows an example of why we don't talk to the press, because they have a habit of twisting things and creating a narrative that is more, I guess, has more flavor, so that the reader is like more interested in what they're reading. And so me, as one of the two co-founders of the Black Perspective, have had some issues with a news outlet that spelled my name wrong twice, and also another leader in the Black Perspective in a row. So they spelled our name wrong twice in a row. And they also just, when we tell them a statement, they would like try to switch our words and like edit it in a way that is, like I said, just a little bit more interesting. And that's one of the reasons why we don't talk to press, and we will continue on not talking to press for that reason. And it's working for us because we're able to control the narrative of what's going on at Battery Park. Because the thing is, if you're not staying there, if you're not living with the people, then you don't really deserve to tell the story.
Yeah, I think you said it all there. As a group, you've had enormous success controlling the crowds that you have managed to bring out, and some occasions it's literally been over 2,000 people. And controlling, you've managed to control these crowds and make sure that these protests have been peaceful as well as impactful. As none of you had too much organizing training before you started out the Black Perspective, and most of you are early 20s and younger, if I'm right. How did you learn these methods, and how did you come to be able to really manage to control such big crowds and make sure that this whole movement stays peaceful and impactful?
It's all just like learning through mistakes. And you are correct, like none of us really have experience leading a crowd of people. And the only experience that I have is from the Black Perspective itself. But fortunately, we have many leaders, many BIPOC leaders that are helping us do all these things. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're able to be so successful in our daily marches, and also maintaining the peace method that we have been using. And I think that Vermont also needs to recognize that they are receiving a very positive request here, because like we could like use the method that is a little bit more violent, but we are choosing to be peaceful. We are asking for demands instead of like taking demands. And I think Vermont needs to take advantage of that. Just take advantage of the fact that we're asking instead of like trying to take it from them. And that's why I think it's like, it's very ridiculous that they still want to ignore us, despite the fact that we're choosing to be peaceful.
Yeah, peaceful, but just incredibly determined. So with the recent decision from the council to get rid of bell events, have your demands changed at all? Are they going to evolve?
No, our demands are still the same. We still want the other 2 officers removed. And like I said, the only thing that we're adding in addition to that is we want better conditions for the houseless individuals that we live with. And prior to us being there and really creating a relationship with them, we didn't really understand that they had their own needs that were not being met, and there was nobody really advocating for them because there was nobody there with them. And us being there and sleeping there with them, we started to realize that they had these other demands as well that were not being discussed because of their condition. And we have privilege, and that privilege is the fact that we don't really have to be at the public. We don't have to be at that park. We all have homes. We all can just decide to just not sleep there. And that itself is privilege right there. We have to extend our privilege to also speaking and advocating for them. And that is what we are adding in addition to our main demands.
And so unfortunately, it is Vermont, which means it's going to get a lot colder quite soon. In fact, I think we've all seen that it's dipped down into the 30s in the past week or so. So with that in mind, what are your plans as we go into late fall, early winter with regards to the occupation of Battery Park?
I'll be honest with you. This was only supposed to be 24 hours and it turned into a month. And we came for Jacob Blake, and that was the reason why we initiated this whole thing, and it turned into these 3 officers. And like we organized this whole area, and it looks beautiful. In the upcoming season, the coldest season, I think it's very uncertain right now. We have been talking about it, and I can like tell you what I think, but like obviously there's a couple of BIPOC leaders that I talk with, and that's when we decide to do something. But like I believe that it's just gonna come naturally. I believe that things are just like fixing themselves in a way, because none of these stuff were like organized for a long-term condition. Like I didn't plan any of this out. I was just planning a 24-hour occupation for Jacob Blake, and then it turned into a month, and we've been sustaining it. And honestly, I have no doubt that we will fail, and I think we will continue on no matter what that would be, because we still want to continue on protesting, doing our daily protests, and also just meeting at Battery Park itself. We might still have the camps out there. We might have some people that are going to be sleeping there to maintain the mutual aid that we are providing to the house individuals. But to be honest with you, it's very uncertain, and I can't really give you an answer on what we want to do in the colder conditions, because I myself do not know yet.
That's totally fair, and I feel it's grown and become more organized as time goes on. So I've got no worries that this isn't going to continue in one form or another, even if it doesn't involve a kind of like the mass encampment that you've got right now. So because you've created such an impact in Burlington, in Vermont, really, in the past month, have you had backing from any national groups or interest from groups across the country on how you've organized and how to be successful in demanding change?
No, we haven't really had any help from any organized outside of Vermont. We just been really like it came really naturally, honestly, and we just have people that are good at organizing at the moment. Like when there's like a time restriction, they're able to organize very quickly. Like once I was told to like organize a screening for a meeting that was very important and that was relevant to our encampment, and I quickly put it together, and like and there are many people that are like me that are able to organize like on a day-to-day basis, but on the long-term basis, I think that thing just comes naturally. And we are there, we are present, and we'll continue on being present. But in the colder season, I believe things are going to be a little bit more difficult. And we have been talking about, I do maintenance at the encampment, and I do have some ideas. However, like in terms of like who's going to be staying there, are we still going to be there? You know, it's like I can't really put my I don't even know what we would do.
Yeah, I'm sure it's kind of changing on a day-to-day basis. Is there any examples from any other municipalities, any other cities, or any other groups that you would like to adopt, or any stories from across the country that you'd like to raise up? So any other protest groups around the country where you're like, yeah, these are the people we kind of want to emulate?
Well, we do have some individuals that come from like we have an individual that came from Colorado, and they have a event going on there that is similar to ours, except it's a little bit different. And they do provide some sort of like method on how they were able to have their demands met, but I don't think we apply them to our own method, and I don't think it affected the way we're doing things. The encampment right now is very much led by certain individuals. We are trying to elevate certain individuals to make the final decisions. So for that reason, I can't really say, oh, this is what I want to do, because I want to make sure that, because at the end of the day, we have to understand that a male is still a male, and being a male, regardless of whether you're white or black, you still have that privilege of being a male. So I want to elevate the females in this whole situation, and I want to make sure that they make the final decisions. And so I can like tell you what I would do, but like at the end of the day, I want to elevate them, and I want to go with what they want to do, because I feel that is something that is very important right now.
Yeah, for sure. And the actions of Zanavia and Harmony and Jess Laporte they've been fantastic. And for those who have not met them, I would certainly urge you to go down to Battery Park and introduce yourselves, because they are quite remarkable women. Lastly, for those on this call who would like to help out and contribute to this fight, how can they do so?
So we have been, well, indirectly, because the thing is, the Black perspective, we're not really supposed to be part of this encampment. We were just supposed to host the event for Jacob Blake, but then now we're actually maintaining the encampment itself, and that is just through donation. We receive donation, and we use the donation to buy supplies for the people that are at the encampment. So the best way for people to help out, if they can't be there, doing the roles that we do have, which is like traffic, we have the escalating team, we have medic team, we have all these, like it's very organized. There's definitely numerous roles that you can participate in, but like if you can't really be there, I think donating is the best option. And also dropping food off to the people, especially hot food right now, would be great, or blankets would be ways for you to help out.
Fantastic, Mohamed. And just for anyone that does want to donate, where would you go to do that?
Well, we do have a Venmo that we have been very successful in maintaining the encampment itself. and the Venmo's name is at The Black Perspective. So just donate through there, or sometimes it's easier for you to just contact us if you don't have like a monetary donation. You could like just message our Facebook page or our website and just say, hey, what do you guys need? And we'll give you like some things that we are in need of, and then you can drop them off. But in terms of just monetary like donation, I think the Black Perspective Venmo is the most successful method that we have been using.
Thanks a lot, Mohamed. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind popping your Facebook page and the Venmo in the chat, just so people can link right to there. But thank you so much for coming on the call this evening, and keep wishing you the best of luck. And yeah, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and thank you to the lieutenant for talking about himself and also what he has been up to, because I'm very interested in what's going on, as I've been very busy with the encampment itself. I haven't been really seeing what else is outside the encampment. So I appreciate learning more about you. All
right. Well, thank you, Mohamed, once again. Keisha Ram was going to speak, but she actually had to run off with David Zuckerman. So I'm just going to let you know, or just say the statement that she had prepared. So she wanted to acknowledge that we're having this conversation the same day that Breonna Taylor received no justice from a grand jury. So please take the time to say her name and think of it today. Next week, Keisha's campaign has 4 racial justice events in a row. She has an activist panel with Congressman Peter Welch and a CBC chair, Karen Bass, on Yom Kippur. On Monday, she has an update on work in the Essex School District, and she'll be attending to the RAD Essex chapter meeting on Tuesday, where we'll be speaking on policing issues. And Tanya Bohovsky's campaign. So yeah, you're also, anyone on this call is welcome to attend that. She has a panel on criminal justice reform with Sarah George and David Scher on Wednesday, and a teach-in on movement politics and state policy at Battery Park on Thursday. So she'll be down on Battery Park at Thursday with you. So she really does invite anyone on this call to one or more of those events, and you can reach out to her anytime. Her email is in the chat. So yeah. Get in touch. She is doing some pretty decent work, and we're excited to see her going to the State House in November. So last on our list of speakers tonight, but certainly no means least, she is a bit of a political newbie, but is making all the right waves in her district. For a leftist Democrat in deep red Milton, in any other year, and for any other candidate, it might be fair to assume to write them off. But 2020 isn't any other year, as we all know, and Emily Hecker isn't just any other candidate. She has been an absolute machine, campaigning hard for the Chittenden 10 state rep seat, and reaching out to her community and finding out that Milton might not be quite as Republican as we think. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Democratic candidate for Chittenden 10, Emily Hecker.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on tonight. And kind of as prompted, just before I kind of talk about myself, I do want to mention Breonna Taylor's name, and also mention that right now, as we speak, police are arresting protesters in Louisville, and neither of the officers have been charged. So, you know, my thoughts are obviously with protesters in Louisville and across our country. And just proof of how much work our country has to do right now, and how much pain, just want to acknowledge how much pain that people are in. So my name is Emily, and I'm a relative newcomer to Vermont. I moved here about 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago. I come from Oklahoma, so apparently I just thrive in deep red places. I spent most of my adult life in France. That's where I raised my children, and then moved back to Oklahoma. And when that didn't work out, moved to Vermont. I mean, it sounds silly to say, but we were big fans of Bernie. 2016, when Trump swept Oklahoma, we just felt like this was not the right place for our family. So we moved here and ended up in Milton. I arrived, enrolled my kids in school, and there were all kinds of scandals and, just really shameful things coming from the school board here in Milton all about the racist policy. And I felt like, I came all this way, so I have to do something about it. I'm of the ilk of, you can complain about it or you can do something. So I ran for school board. I didn't even know what that meant, to be totally honest. Like, I'd never done anything like that before, or quite what it entailed. I didn't even know if I was really apt at it or, had any of the skill sets necessary, but I ran anyway and won. I beat the incumbent chair by 30%. And, people just assumed it wouldn't happen. It would, it was impossible, and it did. And I found it really rewarding, and I felt like I've really been able to make change. And I've had, one really moving moment from that whole experience where the Milton Students for Social Justice, standing outside the polling booth the day that I was, of the campaign, with signs and like freezing temps, holding signs saying like Milton students want Emily to win. And that was kind of the moment, like it clicked for me that it's a small town and it's a small role, and, but it can make a big impact. And so it really inspired me. And a couple of years ago, the two current representatives in Milton, Palistic and Matos, who I'm running up against now, voted against preserving a person's reproductive rights in Vermont. And it's an issue really near and dear to my heart. And I have been really, fighting for that since I was a teenager, growing up in Oklahoma. And I urged them to vote differently, and they didn't. And at that point, I vowed to myself to make change in Milton, to bring new representation in Milton. I was hoping it would be someone else, but it does feel sometimes like liberals and progressive voices flee Milton. Milton's been abandoned. And, I have thought about leaving as well. And then, like I said, you're going to complain or you're going to do something about it and make change. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I'm running. So yeah, my campaign has, it's been interesting. I'm a mom of 3. I have a full-time job. I work for the Winooski School District. So it's been a balancing act. A real highlight, I would say, from my campaign has been phone banking and calling people. I connected with a woman. She said she's in her late 70s. She's been waiting 40 years for Milton to go liberal, and it hasn't happened. Turns out we were from the same exact town in Oklahoma originally, same Unitarian church. Both grew up in that same church. And she was just like overjoyed, and just hearing that spark of hope in her voice after 40 years really kind of reignited my fire. Like, I've got to make this happen. And actually just now when Zuckerman was talking, someone I don't know just came by and dropped off a check. This man was just like, good luck. I'm so excited you're doing this. Like, come on. Like, it's been really, it's been really kind of incredible for me to see, like, people just we're waiting for someone to step up and do it. And I'm really overwhelmed and honored to be that person. The people I'm running against, the 2 men I'm running against who don't believe in reproductive freedom, they've also voted against raising the minimum wage, voted against the Global Warming Solutions Act. They just most recently voted against the guidelines about use of force and the police and law enforcement, and against training and oversight. So these men aren't good for Milton. These men are not good for Vermont. And I want to beat them and make some change and give more students and 78-year-old women in Milton hope that there's a better future. So yeah, so far, I think my chances, I'm not a political analyst. And as, Tom mentioned, I'm a newbie, and I'm definitely not a natural politician or speaker, as you can all tell, or leader. But I did really well in the primary. I just, if you were going to take those results, I would have outseated one of the incumbent chairs or incumbent reps, who's also our select board chair. So I feel like my prospects are high. Just, would love kind of some support these last couple of weeks. Our ballots in Milton were sent out today, so they should be arriving in mailboxes, I would assume, the next couple of days. Just, if people have the desire to help support liberal voice in Milton, you can look on my website and make calls, put up signs, drop some literature. I've been trying to, connect with neighbors when they're outside and visiting some of our like mobile home parks and really trying to connect with some folks here. And it's been amazing. It's been amazingly receptive, and people are, like I said, just excited that someone's finally, going to be the first time ever really that a progressive voice has been elected in Milton. So that's my spiel. And I'm really honored to be here among all these amazing people. And I even have some friends on the call. So it's been really nice to see all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for running. We at Rights and Democracy are really excited that you're running up in Milton. And as you mentioned, it's deeply red up in Milton, and the current state reps have got some really problematic issues. So for you, what are some of the issues that you would take to the State House? What are some of the issues around Milton that you feel aren't getting enough emphasis or really being paid attention to by your current state reps?
I mean, I could go on and on in terms of my current state reps and how they're neglecting the needs of real people in Milton. I mean, minimum wage is just one. Where do we start? Global warming solutions. I mean, that's everybody, everybody on our planet. But I would say something that I'm really passionate about, and it's complicated, right, to figure out what a good answer is. It's our education funding mechanism. Being on the school board, I've seen, Milton kind of prides itself on turning down school budgets. I know it's not the sexiest topic, but it's one that I think has a lot of implications because, it feels almost like you're kind of pitting, like there's a fight between residents of Milton who are struggling or on, lower income, on the lower end of, the income scale, with our schools. And like, I believe very deeply in public education and the power that has to transform our societies. That's why I serve on the school board. That's why I work in Winooski, which happen to be the two districts within Chittenden County that spend the least per pupil and have some of the, the lowest income and highest needs, totally different kind of demographics. But they spend the least, almost $4,000 to $5,000 less than Essex, Westford school district per pupil. So I'd really like to see us change our funding mechanism to something that I think would be more equitable, a similar model to Massachusetts, where we rely really on those high income earners to really pay their share rather than homeowners. I think it's like a 50-50 split. So that's one issue, education's funding mechanism that I've been, trying since I got on the school board to understand, and then really just put an end to the fact that students feel like their town doesn't want them and doesn't value their education in Milton. And, I've had people connect with me and say, like, we want to support our schools, we can't afford it. So really finding a way, there is money. It's just like with our healthcare, the money is there. We just have to find a way to reallocate and show what we really care about. And I think budgets are moral documents. And I'd like to see us really make the right choice by valuing every member, like bringing everyone in our community so they can get behind our schools. So that's one of the kind of main issues that I've given a lot of thought to, and I would really like to see change on. No, with the caveat that it's really complicated. Like our funding system for education is very complex, and it's taken me almost 3 years to even just begin to understand it. So it's not an easy lift, but I think it's kind of crucial for the future of education in Vermont.
Thanks for that answer. And I got a great question here from Sophie. What do you see as the biggest obstacle to you winning in this election?
I think the fact that I'm a Democratic woman is the biggest obstacle. I think Milton, to put it in kind of really common terms, it's like the good old boys club. Our current rep is, both of them, they're like meet every classic kind of standard you can imagine. And they're well known. One of them is the chair of the select board. So he's out there in front of people all the time. And I think people are comfortable with the status quo. There are a lot of Trump signs around Milton, up and down my neighborhood. So I think I would say just like it's just fear, right? Fear of change, not being told the truth about things, not being able to access the information that they need. There's spins around the Global Warming Solutions Act, for example, and the way that was talked about in the media. In some ways, it just makes people confused and they don't know what to trust. I think that's in Milton, it's across our nation right now, is people not feeling confident in this information and the source of information. So I'd say that's probably the biggest challenge. It's changing mindset and getting through to people and letting them kind of gain confidence and trust in a different kind of leadership.
And what message do you feel has most resonated with people you've spoken to?
Well, so I had dropped some signs off for kind of a friend yesterday, and I was walking through a really low income section of our town and housing, and I stopped, and there were two neighbors there, right? I was walking, and so I thought, not comfortable canvassing, obviously, because of COVID, but I had my mask, and we kept our distance, and they were in their lawn. And they were cutting down a tree that had fallen from one neighbor and to the other, and small little properties really close together. And so I said, hi, like I wanted to say hello and introduce myself. And, it said, what are you here for? Why are you running? And they were explaining to me that they said, we're very different. We vote differently every election. Like we have very different values, but we come together because we're neighbors and we care about each other and we find common ground. Right. And so I think, like, even though I have I would definitely call myself a democratic socialist. I grew up in, or lived in France. I believe in socialism. I believe in all of those things. I think that actually it's kind of our far left agenda in America is it's like centrist in a lot of other places, right? We can do much more than we're doing now and push for much more. But I understand that you have to moderate that, right? You have to like meet people in the middle and find that we have more in common than we realize. And that's what I kind of learned from these two neighbors. Like one was telling me she grew up in an intentional community, and the other one just grew up here in Milton her whole life. One was a Trump voter, one was a staunch, Bernie supporter, but here they were cutting this dead tree down, right? And trying to help each other out. And so I think that's kind of the message that I can give to in Milton, and that's been receptive. Is like, I'm a neighbor too, like I care and like I understand, like we can find more in common than we have that we don't agree on. Some things I won't negotiate on, but I have a lot of experience so far as a school board chair or a school board trustee to like find some common ground with people who I don't necessarily agree with and like find a solution. So kind of a conservative approach to radical change is kind of my mantra.
I love it. So in terms of how to help you out, so we're 40 days from the election. You got a real chance. As he said, if your election was held on August 11th, I think you came second by like 3 or 4 votes overall out of the 4 candidates. So you would have got that seat.
Yeah.
So it's super possible, especially with the fact that everyone's got mail-in ballots this year. It does mean there's likely going to be a bigger turnout for Democrats. Yeah, in terms of what we need to do to get you over the finish line, how can we help?
Volunteering, dropping some literature, phone banking. Phone banking has actually been really successful for me in my campaign. I think people are home more. People are happy to have some human contact. It feels like a lot of older people, especially. So yeah, phone banking, if people are comfortable with that, if people would like to get out and walk around, there are like lots of neighborhoods that, just pamphlets and information. And then of course, donations, if people are strapped for time or don't feel comfortable on the phone making cold calls to people, donations would be really helpful. And I have a great crew of students from UVM, from this progressive student union there, who have been running my campaign and volunteering and do amazing work. So yeah, that's pretty much like every other campaign, but just, yeah, that's what I need.
Yeah, for sure. Time and money. It's the two things.
Yeah.
The two things we always ask for as organizers. Well, Emily, thank you so much for coming tonight. Thank you everyone for attending. This was really great attendance. Also, we do this every month. I kind of see each month there's kind of new faces and some faces we don't see from month to month, and people kind of pop in and out. And I really kind of love that about the Burlington chapter. But I would also really love some feedback, and I really love to know more about what are everyone's priorities when it comes to for RAD and Burlington. What do you want to see us pushing? So I would love feedback on these chapter meetings. You can reach me at tomp@radvt.org. And I'll always have a chat with anyone here. I just wanted to, before we left and let you all go and enjoy your evenings, I did want to talk a few priorities are on kind of my mind at the moment in terms of what's going on in Burlington. I said at the very start of this meeting that there was a charter change committee meeting happening right now. It's probably finished at this point. And in there, they were discussing two things, one of which was how we change policing in Burlington. We've seen in the past few months how difficult it has been to get rid of violent police officers. And the reason for that is because the chief of police is the final arbiter on whether or not an officer stays or goes or is disciplined or not within Burlington Police Department. And that goes for basically every single police department across the country. The way we want to change it is by changing the city charter to allow for a police oversight board that actually has teeth, that actually has the ability to discipline officers, there's the ability to subpoena documents, and there's the ability to fire officers that we deem not fit to police our streets. So that's been a real big priority of mine and Burlington RAD for the past few weeks, as well as just cause eviction, which has also been up for charter change. Now, it's likely to get through charter change, just cause eviction. What that is at the moment in Vermont, you are allowed to be evicted for any reason whatsoever. The landlord that you have doesn't have to give you a reason to evict you. And often this comes in the form of a lease finishing and then landlord telling you to get out, you can't renew your lease. And whereas this is okay in 90% of times, those 10% is because of discrimination. It's because of racism, misogyny, ableism. It's because the landlord doesn't like the way you look. It's because of the way the landlord doesn't like your family, and they can basically chuck you out for any reason. And in a market as tight as Burlington, that can really be devastating for a lot of people, especially those not as privileged or on the wrong end of the socioeconomic ladder. We want to stop this by implementing just cause eviction, which would mean that landlords would only be able to evict if you'd broken the lease or if you had not paid rent. Otherwise, they would not be allowed to evict you. That is going through charter change right now. It's likely to get through because we do have the votes, but it will then go through to the city council, and after that, it will be on the ballot in March. We are finding enormous pushback from landlords on this measure because it does grant tenants so many more rights, and they are scared of the fact that they will lose those rights themselves. And so it's going to take an enormous effort to make sure this passes in March. I will be putting out information soon on how you can help with that, but that is certainly something that we would really like you to keep an eye on because it is something we're really going to need help with. And finally, ranked choice voting is another thing that we are pushing for at the moment. There's another priority. This is being spearheaded by Jack Hansen, and you may have seen the mayor vetoed one version of it about a month ago, but it is going to pass through the city council again and also be on the ballot on March. So if fairer elections is your thing, we'd also love for help on that. A big thank you to all our guests tonight, Emily, Mohamed, and the Lieutenant Governor David Zuckerman. A big thank you to everyone that's been on this call. The ones we got left, Sophie, Patricia, Martha, Liz, Leah, Kelsey, Josh, Jake, Gary, Erica, Emily, of course, and everyone else that had to drop off. Really big thank you. Honestly, I would like to make this Burlington chapter a far more cohesive and a far bigger push for change in Burlington. So if you want to talk to me anytime, please get in touch, tomp@radvt.org. If you email me, I would love to set up like a one-on-one. so we can talk about what resources I have to push the policies and ideas that you have. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Good night. I hope you have a good one. See you around.